Hello, I'm Tone Lanzillo, and this is Climate-Duluth. Climate-Duluth is a series of conversations with people from Duluth who are concerned about the climate and its impact upon our greater community. Today, I'm extremely pleased to have with us Randel Hanson from Lake Superior College. Great to have you, Randel.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here.
This is a pleasure. Why don't we just share a little bit about your work at Lake Superior College?
Yeah, right. Well, Tone, I am the co-director of the Eco-Entrepreneurship program at Lake Superior College. And that is a new program that we began over this past year to think about place-based economic development that is also ecologically responsive. And to do so in a kind of place-based way that recirculates the wealth that's created in economic development at the same time that we can have, in a sense, face-to-face conversations about how we share the potentially harmful aspects of how we humans get what we need from the planet.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it's a unique program. I think it's altogether fitting for what's happening in Duluth and the kind of zeitgeist. And the program brings together science, applied science, business and entrepreneurship, and social analysis to present the students with the skills and the knowledge and the networks that can help them be successful in moving forward with either launching a farm, launching a business, working with an existing farm, business, government, or NGO to help make it more ecologically responsive and so forth. And so as part of that Eco-Entrepreneurship program, we've also launched the LSC Living Lab, which is a 2-acre farm site on which we've launched our own eco-enterprise in which the students are integrated in all aspects from seed to sale. And really, it's a platform to allow them to really gain the practical skills that they sort of learn about in the classroom, but get to carry it out in collaboration with us and learn really how to run a business and all of the fun and complicated and not so fun aspects of making that work. So it's exciting. I think it's something for me that really brings together decades of work in the program design, and I hope can really contribute substantively to the social, ecological, and economic life of Duluth.
Wow. What are your hopes or plans for the programs you're working with either now or in the future? Do you have any things you're looking at in the future for your programs? Or?
Well, again, the program was only formally launched in August of 2019, and so we're building that program. We already have about 20 majors in it. We're building the field site, which is really going to demonstrate diverse forms of regenerative agriculture that introduces students in the community to sort of the nuts and bolts of growing things in a regenerative way, getting what we need as humans from the earth while we're enhancing its capacity to maintain the conditions for life for us and everything else. And over this winter, we're launching a field school that will basically allow the experts in our community to share their knowledge and, you know, in a non-credit classroom context where so much good work is being done by people in our community. And there's really all too few platforms for them to teach classes and share that knowledge. And I think, you know, in this 21st century top-down egghead education, so to speak, is still important. But I think that this collaborative learning model where we break down some of the silos and create collaborations between experts and practitioners because in many cases, practitioners are out ahead of the academic world in terms of sustainable practices and actually getting things done. And so how do we unleash that creative potential of our community to teach itself how to be, again, more ecological in our economic development?
Wow. The ideas that you're bringing to Lake Superior College, are these ideas and models that have been done in other colleges, community colleges around the country, or is this something new and innovative? Or?
It is new and innovative. To my knowledge, we're the only community college that is doing this. There are a small handful, 3 or 4 colleges in the United States that are doing this at 4-year and graduate schools. But eco-entrepreneurship is really alive and thriving globally. And in Europe, it's a very important sort of vehicle, as well as in Africa, and for different reasons. In Europe, they have really, functional state systems that take care of health and education and so forth. And I was just in Norway at the only organic farm school there, and the interesting thing about that really efficient state system is that in building local food systems, you really need entrepreneurship. But because the state is so effective, it's kind of a blank spot in young people. How do you be entrepreneurial? Right. And so, again, teaching entrepreneurial skills in Europe is a different context here. And then in Africa, essentially, in many countries in Africa, in some sense, they're jumping infrastructures. They don't have the kind of industrial infrastructures of the Northern Hemisphere. Okay. And so instead of building those and then moving on, they're leaping over them. In other words, they're embracing renewable energy instead of maybe putting in existing grids, or they're not putting in landlines and they're simply going to cell phones. And I think that smaller scale eco-entrepreneurship then plays a larger role in the social and economic and ecological development in Africa. So in some sense, we have the great opportunity where we can learn from both Europe and Africa and other places in which eco-entrepreneurship is thriving, and figure out how to locally adapt that to our context.
Wow. When you think about Duluth or the Duluth region, what do you think are some of the challenges or hopes for Duluth in the future, given your research, your studies? Yeah.
Well, I think, I think we have enormous potential. In my mind, I think we're moving, not just Duluth and our western Lake Superior region, but really all over the planet, we're moving towards more bioregional development in which smaller governance systems can adjudicate the goods and the bads of how we humans live together. And then we share regionally, our goods and our services and so forth. And I think in our region, in our community, we have enormous sort of cultural capital. People love this place. People are deeply committed. We have incredible natural capital with the lake and the outdoors. And together, I think those are key building blocks that we can leverage to create, again, place-based eco-entrepreneurship that really helps us become better ancestors over the long term. In other words, that get what we need in our lifetimes, but also enhance the capacity of our children and grandchildren to do the same, as well as the other forms of life that we share this planet with and which are intimately connected to our own lives via their part in creating and maintaining the kind of biospheric conditions for life.
Right.
So I think we have enormous opportunity here in Duluth to really build upon the important work that people have been doing. And we also have challenges, right? We have perhaps less capital than some other regions. That can be a good thing and a bad thing. And we have this legacy of extractionism in which for 400 years, since the fur trade and the timber trade and the iron ore trade and the taconite trade and possibly additional resources that are extractive in nature that really don't build our communities, but rather build other areas of the planet and leave problematic ecological legacies as well as boom and bust economies that create difficult social and political ramifications. And so I think what we're in the process of doing is really, as a book had it that was written in the 80s by a collective of Duluthians, we're resettling Duluth, I think, right now.
Oh, okay.
In a way that is long-term, is place-based, is sort of understanding that we have an enormous responsibility living on this incredible lake and with this natural environment, with the diverse human community and so forth that we have here. And we have to resettle ourselves for the long term rather than simply serve as an extractive site for others that leave us with toxic legacies.
You mentioned this book, this collection. It sounds like it still has an important message then for today.
It does, absolutely. And in fact, a group of us are discussing updating that to the 21st century, in some sense, rewriting that book, in which the book itself, which was published in '86 by a huge collection of Duluthians under the leadership of Brooks Anderson and others, had an invitation that this will need to be updated. And I think that, we're at a time where we know, the ecological sphere has changed dramatically. The economic context of Duluth has changed dramatically from the 80s to where we're at today. And I think it's an opportunity to, in a sense, hit the Control-Alt-Delete switch on our thinking to essentially frame where we could go over the next decades.
Okay.
And so that's obviously a collaborative, collective project. As we build inclusive prosperity for Duluth, I think having those imaginal frameworks are really, really useful.
Yeah. Where did your interest in the environment, climate, where did this all begin for you?
Well, I grew up on a small farm in western Minnesota on the Prairie Pothole region, which is one of the key, or at least was one of the key ecosystems in all of North America. It stretched from Iowa all the way through Minnesota and the Dakotas into Canada. And it was this area that was, in some sense, flattened by the glaciers. And so water didn't flow. It sort of sat in potholes there, and as a result, had enormous biodiversity and so forth. And tribal communities, since time immemorial, lived in these places and so forth. And, my settler colonial ancestors ended up there. And I grew up in that area and essentially lived outdoors, riding horses, fishing, trapping, hunting. My dad was a big, hunter, fisher, trapper, and so I basically, I wasn't an environmentalist, how we would think about it today, I guess, but I lived in relation to the outdoor world. And then by the time I was 12 or 15 or so, there was an enormous transformation of that world where, the Earl Butz agricultural regime, where, get big or get out, really was trained upon that area, and dredge ditches and tiling and leveling of hills and raising of groves and farm sites just took off like crazy in the 70s. And I witnessed the incredible degradation of the natural world as it existed out there. And it was a shock. It was really like pulling the soul out of a body in some sense. And, that was the language of that a farmer told, a friend told me, that the soul was taken from this landscape. And, like millions of others, I, left the farm and went to the city, and for years I sold carpet. I worked in a warehouse. I worked in a factory, and in my mid-20s, I was able to begin college, the first person in my family to do so. And, I began kind of connecting the dots, sort of structurally, to explain the experience that I had in this profound degradation of the local environment that I grew up in. And, I've subsequently realized that in certain respects, for people of my age, I'm 60 years old, that is the common experience of the planet. That somehow we have participated in, either passively or otherwise, of a profound degradation of the planet in the name of progress. Mm-hmm. And that's caught up to us now in the 21st century, where our ostensible success has led to this crisis moment of the biosphere, in which it does not have the sufficient capacity to regenerate the Holocene conditions of life. And so we're hurtling ourselves in the biosphere into this unpredictable Anthropocene epoch. We really don't know how far we're going to push this and what the consequences are. But I think experiencing, reflecting upon, and learning about the degradation of that prairie pothole region has been a profound teacher for me. And then again, sort of realizing that it's not the unique experience. It's, in fact, the common experience of the late 20th century, in which the so-called great acceleration of economic development was unleashed in a way that did not take into account the larger ecological impacts. And so here we are, with this young generation, Generation Anthropocene, who have grown up now being told that the world is unsustainable as we presently organized it, and that somehow in their generation we're going to cross a bridge to sustainability or not. And yet we give them so few platforms around which to really plug into creating a more sustainable human system. And I think, therein lies the roots of the profound political and psychological problems that we have today.
Wow. It must be a very great experience to be working with these young people at the college, and hopefully, yeah.
Well, it is. I think that, you know, the degradation that I referenced a bit ago, that was made normative for me,
Okay.
has not for them been made normative.
Okay.
For them, they neither remember the amazing biodiversity of that childhood world that I grew up in, nor do they have a horizon, a future horizon in which they can confidently feel like the world is sort of getting better, or that we kind of have a collective momentum towards, doing good work. Because I think what they're staring in the face is this, again, what the scientists are telling us, that we have a scarce short time to really hit the Control-Alt-Delete switch again on our infrastructures in ways that transform them from degrading systems to regenerative systems, and yet look at our institutions across academia, government, business. So many of them are involved in either passive or active denialism, and they don't really, take this problem seriously relative to what the essentially 99.9% of scientists are telling us. Mm-hmm. And so I think young people face this crisis in ways that us elders perhaps don't psychologically experience. And as Greta Thunberg said, how dare you, place your hope with us when you do nothing. Mm-hmm. And yet, through young people, our hope lives. And I think, for us elders, if we cannot commit ourselves to building the platforms that allow young people to experiment and actively change our infrastructures, I think we need to indeed get out of the way. And we're in this moment of crisis and opportunity. And this is not hyperbole. This is not alarmism. This is the sober analysis of the brilliant scientists across the world. Mm-hmm. And somehow, again, the elders of our institutions allow it to fall on their deaf ears in ways that don't recognize this crisis and substantively make the changes that are necessary.
Right. What or who inspires you to keep doing what you're doing, your work, your research? Are you pushing the envelope? Yeah.
Well, I think it's really young people and my own children and grandchildren, but more broadly, we I don't have grandchildren yet, by the way, but more broadly, we face this moment again of crisis and opportunity. And I've been given an amazing gift of education. I was the first person in my family to go to college. I loved it. I got a PhD, and I studied American environmental history. And I'm committed to regenerative agriculture from the education of so many of the amazing farmers that I work with. And that knowledge is a gift and an obligation, I think. You know, I feel that I know enough to commit myself to the important work ahead, which is, again, to create platforms that unleash the impatient creativity of our youth, of our young people, to really redesign all of our infrastructure, our food, water, energy, housing, transportation, from the industrial patterns in which their magic elements and their tragic elements go side by side, and to disentangle that and rebuild regenerative infrastructures that, again, get what we need from planetary systems while not degrading them. And this question of how to do this is imminent. We are creative species. I believe that we can do this, reboot our infrastructure towards regenerative systems. And I feel like my moment along this Great Lake in this snowy sun is, you know, to help create opportunities for young people to do that. And frankly, you know, I'm inspired by their impatient creativity, by their wondering, why aren't we responding to reality here?
Okay.
Why aren't we throwing our shoulders to the wheels of change in ways that recognize what all of the scientists are telling us?
Right.
Why are we living in the denial-sphere? And, you know, those questions are powerful and they're motivating. And it's not just the time for young people, it's the time for elders to do it, to work.
Great. Randel, I want to thank you for being with us today, and I look forward to staying in touch with you as you continue your work. In closing today, I'd like to read an excerpt from Down to Earth by Bruno Latour, and it was actually a book recommended by Randel. If the anguish runs so deep, it is because each of us is beginning to feel the ground slip away beneath our feet. We are discovering, more or less obscurely, that we are all in migration toward territories yet to be discovered and reoccupied. This is because of a fourth historic event, the most important and least discussed. It took place on December 12, 2015 in Paris, just as agreements about the climate was being reached at the end of the conference called COP21. What counts as a measure of the event's real impact is not what the delegates decided. It's not even whether or not the agreement is carried out. No, that crucial fact is that on that December day, all the signatory countries, even as they were applauding the success of the improbable agreement, realized with alarm that if they all went ahead according to the terms of the respective modernization plans, to the terms of that they agreed to, there would be no planet compatible with their hopes for development. They would need several planets, and they only have one. Now, if there's no planets, no Earth, no soil, no territory to house the globe of globalization toward which all these countries claim to be headed, then there is no longer an assured homeland, as it were, for anyone. So each of us thus faces the following question. Do we continue to nourish dreams of escaping, or do we start seeking a territory that we and our children can inhabit? Take care.
Amen.